Right now, somewhere in the Kalahari Desert, a Hadza man and woman who met 3 days ago are sleeping in the same corner of camp. Nobody made an announcement. Nobody signed anything. They just started spending time near each other, and then they didn't stop. This is not unusual. This is not scandalous. This is just Tuesday. For most of human history, sex worked nothing like it does today. No dating apps, no courtship rituals borrowed from Victorian England, no rings, no ceremonies, no waiting period enforced by social pressure or religious law. And yet, ancient humans had rules, complex ones. The question isn't whether they had sex. Of course they did. The question is what that actually looked like, and the answer is messier and more interesting than either the free love fantasy or the traditional values narrative that people tend to project onto the past. Let's start with what researchers actually know. Anthropologist Frank Marlowe spent years living with the Hadza in northern Tanzania and tracking every dimension of their social lives, including who paired with whom and for how long. What he found was a system that doesn't map cleanly onto any modern category. The Hadza practice what anthropologists call serial monogamy. Most adults pair off into something that functions like a couple. They sleep together, hunt and gather in loose coordination, and share food with each other more than with anyone else in camp. But those pairings dissolve and reform across a lifetime with a frequency that would look unstable by contemporary Western standards. A Hadza adult might have 3 or 4 serious partners over the course of their life, not because they are reckless, but because the structure of their world makes long-term pairing easy to exit and easy to re-enter. The stability of these partnerships varied according to circumstance. A couple with young children was more likely to remain paired for several years, as the demands of early child rearing functioned as a natural adhesive. A couple without children might part ways within months if the partnership felt imbalanced or unfulfilling. Age also mattered considerably. Older men and women, past their reproductive prime, often maintained partnerships with greater consistency, possibly because the relationship itself had become a source of companionship and accumulated routine rather than primarily a reproductive or resource-sharing arrangement. Here's what's fascinating. In a camp of 25 to 30 people where you can pack everything you own and walk somewhere else in 15 minutes, the enforcement mechanisms for keeping couples together simply don't exist. There is no mortgage. There are no shared bank accounts. There is no legal apparatus that requires you to stay. If a relationship became miserable, the most efficient solution was to stop having it. Anthropologists have documented this pattern across dozens of hunter-gatherer groups worldwide, from the Kung of the Kalahari to the Agta of the Philippines. Separation was common. It was also quiet. You didn't need a lawyer. You needed a bag and a direction. So what about one-night stands specifically? The honest answer is that the category itself may not have existed as a meaningful concept. In a camp where everyone knows everyone, where you've grown up with most of the adults around you, and where the same 30 people have been in and out of your life for decades, there is no real equivalent of meeting a stranger at a bar. The social world was too small and too interconnected for encounters to be truly anonymous. A liaison between 2 people in camp was known about within hours, not because people were spying, but because Polly Wiesner's research showed that gossip and social monitoring were essentially a full-time community project. Who was sleeping with whom was one of the central topics of daily conversation. It was the news. But that doesn't mean brief pairings didn't happen. They did. Anthropologist Kim Hill, who has studied the ache of Paraguay for decades, documented what he called opportunistic mating in hunter-gatherer groups, short-term sexual encounters that weren't intended to form lasting bonds. These happened more frequently when camps merged, when trade visits brought outsiders in, or when existing partnerships had recently dissolved. The social math around these encounters was carefully tracked by the community, and the consequences were real. A man who pursued another man's partner risked exile. A woman who formed alliances that destabilized the camp's social balance faced sustained gossip pressure that could make her position untenable. The freedom was real, so were the costs. One of the most important things to understand is the role that paternity uncertainty played in all of this. In many hunter-gatherer societies, there is a concept that researchers call partible paternity, the belief that a child can have more than one biological father, that multiple men's contributions accumulate to create a single child. This isn't a metaphor, it's a literal belief about how reproduction works. The Bari people of Venezuela, studied by anthropologist Stephen Beckerman in the 1990s, held this belief, and Beckerman found something striking in the data. Children who had a secondary father, a man who acknowledged contributing to the pregnancy and took an interest in the child's welfare, had significantly higher survival rates than children who had only one acknowledged father. More men invested in a child's survival, and that child was more likely to reach adulthood. The belief system, whatever its relationship to biological reality, was producing better outcomes. This has enormous implications for how we think about ancient sexual behavior. If a community believes that a child benefits from multiple male investors, then a woman who has relationships with more than one man isn't violating a norm. She's working within one. The jealousy, the possessiveness, the sense of exclusive ownership over a partner's sexuality that feels so natural and instinctive to modern humans, those responses were not universal. They were shaped by specific social conditions, specifically by agriculture, by property, by inheritance, by the emergence of systems where a man needed to be certain that the child he was investing resources in was actually his. Before farming, there was almost nothing to inherit. A Hadza hunter doesn't own land. He doesn't own livestock. He has arrows, a hide, some beads. There is no estate to pass on. When there is no property, paternity certainty matters much less, and the sexual and social arrangements that obsess agrarian and industrial societies become less urgent. Anthropologist Christopher Ryan and physician Casilda Jetha made this argument at length in their 2010 book, drawing on primate comparisons, anatomical evidence, and cross-cultural data. Their core claim was that human sexuality was shaped by hundreds of thousands of years of living in small, cooperative, relatively non-possessive groups, and that the intense jealousy and pair-bonding rigidity of modern humans is a more recent adaptation, one that came with farming and the concept of accumulated wealth. Not everyone in the field agrees with every piece of that argument, but the underlying evidence that prehistoric sexuality was more flexible and contextual than our modern defaults is fairly solid. What about love? This is where people tend to get either cynical or sentimental, and both reactions miss the point. Pair bonds in hunter-gatherer societies are real. The emotional attachments are genuine. Marlowe's research with the Hadza documented real grief over lost partners, real jealousy, real protectiveness. Humans evolved to attach. That capacity is ancient, probably older than our species in its current form. But attachment and exclusivity are not the same thing, and the assumption that they must go together is a cultural artifact, not a biological law. Hunter-gatherers fell in love. They also lived in a social world where love existed alongside a much more pragmatic and communally embedded understanding of sex, reproduction, and partnership than the one most modern people grow up with. There was also a demographic reality that shaped all of this. In a hunter-gatherer camp, the adult population at any given time was small and in constant flux. People died young by modern standards. Injuries, infections, childbirth, predation. The average life expectancy at birth in a Paleolithic population was probably somewhere between 30 and 40 years, though individuals who survived childhood could live much longer. In that context, widowhood was common, and remarriage was essentially immediate. A woman who lost a partner could not afford years of solitary mourning. A man who lost a partner faced the same pressure. The community needed functioning pairs. Children needed adults. The social system was built to absorb loss and reconstitute quickly. This is the part of the conversation that tends to make people uncomfortable in both directions. Some people want ancient humans to have been sexually liberated in a way that validates modern permissiveness. Others want them to have been naturally monogamous in a way that validates traditional structures. The actual picture is neither. It was a system calibrated to the specific pressures of small group living, high mortality, shared child rearing, and a social world where your reputation was your only real currency. Sex happened within that system. Sometimes it was a lasting bond. Sometimes it was brief. Sometimes it was complicated. The same way it is now. We just built different walls around it, and then forgot we were the ones who built them.